Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of the React. My name is Brad Ward, and the man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Right on time, brother. Right on time. Good to see you all filing into the comments, and it's Combine Week. The fun shall begin on Thursday, the real fun, although lots of people speaking today, coaches, GMs, all that good stuff. Hello to everybody filing in the chat. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. If you're watching on X, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. And in the description below is the link to the OBR where we are covering this stuff wall to wall. So make sure you're locked in over there as well. What's going on, Pete? What's up, man?
Just keeping up with everything that's going on in the combine, which to this point isn't all that much.
Yeah, so I just saw somebody put in our Slack. Was that, yeah, so I don't know who this is, but I wanted to read it because it's interesting. And I don't know how you could, come away with a consensus at this point. Because they're just hanging out, right? So, and doing this stuff. But growing consensus out of the combine from Hayden Winks. Oh, he's from
Underdog.
Titans edge at 1, Abdul Carter. Browns quarterback at 2, Cam Ward. Giants cornerback / wide receiver 3, Travis Hunter. Thoughts?
We'll see about Cam Ward's hands.
Yeah, that's a concern really for you. Where did that come from? Just the fumbles?
That and watch. Yes, he has 19 fumbles, and then watching the video where he's giving Shedeur Sanders all kinds of crap. The most recent one, I just looked at the hands and they look very, very small. But if his hands check out and the Browns are comfortable with him, I totally get it. The Giants one is weird.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, they may view him as a corner first, and then it makes a little bit more sense. Personally, I think he's more of a wide receiver, and they just took him league neighbors. But it's interesting because they don't have a quarterback. Now, having said that, if they go and sign a quarterback like Sam Darnold, or they make a move for somebody that's a credible starter, then sure, I get it. Sure. But at least right this second, with no answer at that position for them, it's a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I would say the same. I've always kind of all along thought they would be in the quarterback business here at the top of the draft. So that will be interesting as well. What else did we have, Pete? I wanted to ask you about at the top of the show. Juan Thornhill, the Browns are going to cut, or they're going to part ways. He got that wonderful tattoo on himself when he became a Brown 2 years later. He has the elf tattoo. Interesting. And then the Charlie Hewlett, right? Also, anything to make of this stuff? Nothing surprising there with Thornhill. The Hewlett one, I didn't really see that coming. Why are they making that move? Is he retiring?
Well, he's 34.
Yeah.
And he suffered a rib injury, which incidentally happened as a result of friendly fire last year that knocked him out for the rest of the season. And the Browns had signed Rex Sunahara, the Bay Village product, who's 28 and who'd been here the whole season. It seemed like my read on this is they felt like Sunahara did a good enough job.
Yeah.
That, whether or not Hewlett's ready to retire or not, just felt like the Browns didn't want to be in one. They don't want to carry 2 long snappers on their 90-man roster, which sure. I totally get. And then 2, if they're ready to move on and they have somebody good, go ahead and get somebody who can do the job for several years, as opposed to trying to hang on to Charlie Hewlett. And I get why you'd want to keep Charlie Hewlett. He's the longest tenured Brown. He's been here since 2014.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not that long snapper is going to be the breaking point, but people want to see this roster get younger. and Charlie Hewlett's one of your oldest players. So I get it from that standpoint.
Thoughts on Thornhill? This is out in his contract. It makes sense if you were going to get rid of him to do it now. Didn't work out like the Browns wanted, but like me and you said, when he did play, he did a good job. When he was there, he was just his availability wasn't always great, and of course he got ridiculed for slacking on the one play and was labeled a slacker after that.
So yeah, I mean, I think Juan Thornhill is a more than capable single high free safety, which is what the Browns wanted. Certainly was infinitely better for that role than John Johnson III was, who was miscast trying to be that. The calf injury sucked. I mean, they knocked him out 2 different stints over the 2 years. And yes, he got knocked. I don't remember which game it was where he got knocked for effort. And then the next game, he was really good. Overall, I think it just comes down to rubber didn't meet the road enough on value to pay him what would have been about $7 million, which is fine. It's just now you have to replace that role. And I guess if you're the Browns and you sort of look at it, like Juan Thornhill as an athlete and his range over the top is really good. He's exceptionally fast. But in terms of just sort of impact, I'm guessing that their read on it was that Ronnie Hickman wasn't that big of a drop off. So why pay $7 million when Ronnie Hickman wasn't that big of a drop off? Not that means Ronnie Hickman's going to automatically get that job. It's just if that's the next man up and it wasn't a huge dip, they can try to go get somebody else to play that role and get what they believe might be more impact. Now I'm curious to sort of see, do the Browns still want to play a whole lot of one high, or do they want to play more combo safety roles, which to me, I think their safeties are more suited for. Grant Delpit can do everything. He's really good. You're not going to want him to play free, though he can, because he can man up tight ends. He can play in the box. He can do all these things. But if you play a lot more too high, if you play a lot more too high or show a lot of things that can get to too high, then you can have both guys do all the things. And maybe that's where they want to go. But if they want to stay single high, now they have to try to get somebody else to come in and do that job. Maybe there's a world where they envision Hickman doing it. Now, if Hickman can lock down that job, one, he's probably going to be in line for a contract extension because he was an undrafted rookie and he's running out of time on that. And then two, it'd be a pretty substantial success for them to have gotten him, again, 2023, that draft, which is real for not having a first or second round pick, is paying huge dividends that they've gotten a guy who at worst is your third safety in Hickman and could theoretically at least be in a competition for the starting job.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you just said it right there. Either way, you should bring in competition for him. Regardless, I don't think he's proven to be the starter outright. But I was surprised to see when I was doing the cut candidate article that he has played. He did play like 380 some snaps at free safety last year. So played a lot of snaps actually. So overall almost 500, I think.
And he played a ton the first year, his rookie year, because that year Rodney McLeod had gone down with a bicep injury before Thornhill went down with the calf. So suddenly undrafted rookie free safety Ronnie Hickman is your starter, and for the last 4 games of the season was pretty solid. And had the big pick 6 against the Jets. Now, obviously, it did not go nearly as well in the playoffs when they played the Houston Texans, but he was an undrafted rookie. So your expectations had to be a little bit tempered. But overall, for a month, people were really happy with what Ronnie Hickman was giving them, because at the time, it was him and D'Anthony Bell playing that stretch when the Browns were really just gutted by injuries, and they still obviously won 3 of those last 4. And were able to make it to the postseason and had people feeling good about their chances without Delpit, who was on IR, without their top 3 guys who were all on injured reserve at that point.
Yeah. When Delpit came back late that year, didn't he?
He tried, but he couldn't get there for the playoff game.
All right. So today, the main news out of the combine, for Browns wise at least, was Andrew Berry made the press availability rounds. He did about a 10-minute session in front of all the media. He did a side session with just kind of the Browns media, Cleveland media, a little scrum there. And then he did a couple minutes on Cleveland Browns Daily. I have clips from all three. Tried to pick out the pertinent ones because there was a lot of, repetitive. We're not going to trade Myles Garrett over and over again at the beginning. But this was worth this is rather entertaining and was worth, I thought, a view. The first question he's asked after he's done with his opening statement. Here we go.
For questions.
How did you feel when he expressed no confidence in you producing a winner?
Yeah, Tony, I think with that, I'll open up for questions.
I guess that's it. Thought the question was entertaining. But so asking him how he felt about Myles giving no confidence that he could field a winner off the top there. I thought that one was longer. Apologize.
Intentionally provocative question.
Yes.
Isn't really true of what was going on. Now, maybe Myles does feel that way, but that's not what he said. Ultimately, his deal is he doesn't think they can win fast enough for what he wants, which is to basically compete for the Super Bowl this year. I don't know how many people believe that the Browns are going to field a Super Bowl contender this year, unless they draft a quarterback who's going to be Jaden Daniels this year. It's just not likely. They can make the postseason, and maybe there's a magical ride where they somehow get there, but so be it. But ultimately, it doesn't really change anything as far as how the Browns are going to operate. And Andrew Berry's not going to tell Tony Grossi or anybody else how he feels regarding how players behave.
Sure.
Nor should he. It's a silly way, but obviously, you want to make he drove 6 hours, so he wants to get his money's worth. So that's where you go. Now, certainly there's a ton of pressure on Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to deliver, given the circumstances. And if and more likely when Myles does sign an extension, that is going to come with additional pressure. And I think most fans and onlookers in general would say that pressure is warranted, given that they just won 3 games. There needs to be a sizable bounce back. I still am of the opinion that this is not a 3-win roster. If Jameis Winston played 17 games, I think the Browns win at least 5 or 6. So, and some people think a little bit more than that. So if you're trying to get from 5 or 6 to 10, it's not quite as big of a lift as 3, but still, there's a lot that has to go right. They've got a lot to get squared away. Quarterback is certainly important. I can understand why anyone would be frustrated coming out of this, as Andrew Berry said himself, as Joe Bitonio commented on him when he was asked about whether he was going to play again this year. So all of that is warranted. But the framing of the question was to make a point, I guess.
Pete, do you have any lean on Joel Bitonio?
Yeah, I think he's playing.
You do? Yeah.
I could be wrong. I suspect if Joel wasn't playing, he'd be skinnier.
That's fair.
He looks like he's still in
keeping them
sort of
weight on,
playing, thought process. And I think more than anything, and I speculated on this at the time in talking about Myles Garrett's situation. I'm sure Joe Bitonio is going to ask all those questions, because ultimately, if Joel comes back, the Browns have said they're not trading Myles Garrett anyway. But if they were, they would basically tell Joe Bitonio, go ahead and retire. We're not going to we're going to go ahead and cut you. And he could play somewhere else if he wanted to, but he said flat out, I have no
Yeah.
interest in playing anywhere else. So I don't think he'd put himself in a position where I don't think the organization would put him in a situation where he's like, I want to come back and play the last year of my contract, the final year of my career, and the Browns are going to turn around and go, yeah, we don't think so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would agree with you there. You're watching The React. That's Pete Smith. I'm Brad Ward. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you're on your way in or out of the chat, feel free to contribute with your comments. Let's go to this next one. This is, he just kept having to repeat himself about the Miles thing, but I thought this was the one of the more, I don't know, I liked this one the best, I guess, this question, the way he responded.
Again, like our focus is on building the team, and again, Miles is going to be a big part of that.
How many calls have you gotten?
I wouldn't really touch on any conversations that I have with other teams, just respectfully. I don't think that's appropriate just for current and future business, but it's irrelevant to this situation because we're not interested in moving Miles.
So is there an offer that could?
It's irrelevant to the situation because we're not moving Miles. So I think that was maybe the last one he had to answer, but it is if he stays steady with this, which he felt steadfast in his messaging today.
It's another one of those things where this question is meaningless. How many calls have you taken? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, teams have called.
Yeah.
31 teams all 31 other teams may have called. Teams from other leagues may have called.
Yeah.
He's Myles Garrett. He's the best pass rusher in football. It would be, negligent not to at least get a feel for the situation and touch base. But at the same time, if they're not interested in trading, what difference does it make? Ultimately, none of them matter. There's nothing to suggest at this point that the Browns have changed their posture. Nothing to suggest that should change their posture, because what has changed in the last sort of few weeks since the Super Bowl? Nothing. So until something happens or something changes, I don't see a reason for anything to budge. So much has to happen for Miles to be traded from the Browns side that like other moves would be coming. The Browns aren't going to be like surprised to a whole bunch of agents of players that are on this team that we're doing this thing because it's going to screw over their client potentially. In addition, like they're going to have future clients and they're going to remember like this situation and potentially hold it against them. And Andrew Berry has a very good reputation with player agents in terms of being a straight shooter. So there's nothing to suggest that the Browns are going to change their mind on anything. Something drastic would have to happen. Obviously, if Jimmy Haslam comes in and says, no, we're trading him, that's a thing. That would change the dynamic, but there's nothing to suggest that should happen. Jimmy Haslam wants to win football games.
Yeah.
There's no if they trade Myles Garrett, they're essentially resetting the roster, and they're not going to do that. So I understand why people are asking. Certainly, it's a question that has to be asked. But so much of this is driven by the fact that everybody else wants Myles Garrett to go to potentially their team, and two, it's certainly more interesting if Myles Garrett is a story to be potentially traded as opposed to not a story at all.
Yeah, there's there's just like this consensus feeling when you watch the national pundits, Pete, that they just like are assuming that he is going to get traded. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, and we did this with Lamar Jackson. Everybody, I assumed it that Lamar Jackson wasn't gonna be with the Ravens until he was. Brandon Ayuk was going to get traded until he wasn't. This is often happens. Part of this is because the agent will insist that they're doing the thing.
Yeah.
Except, it's about maximizing the leverage for their client and potentially maximizing the earning power. And as you've pointed out in the past, this one's not necessarily financial, but it also is financial because Myles Garrett does want to maximize his earning power. And certainly The Browns are seemingly prepared to do that, but what else is at stake here? Or is it just is it sending a message? Is it the agency trying to see if they can't force this thing because of what it would mean for them? Unclear, but certainly they are steadfast in their belief that they can get him out, or at least that's what they're telling people. And again, it's more interesting if he's potentially traded than he isn't. And there's a certain element of this, which is it's the Browns. They'll screw it up, even though on this type of stuff they generally don't, other than the Deshaun Watson trade.
The next video is his comments on Nick Chubb.
I would say at this point that we do expect Nick to hit the market. Obviously his contract is up this year. We'll meet with his reps and everything like that. But it's something that obviously we need to work on for the next couple weeks.
Right, this I don't know what to think of this. I don't know how I expected him to respond. I guess I didn't really have an expectation, but it did kind of take back a little bit that he was just like, yeah, he's going to hit the market. I figured he would say something to the effect that we would like to get something done with him. He kind of did, I guess. He said we got to get with his reps or whatever. Once again, when you talk about Nick Chubb, it feels like I can't imagine him drawing a large figure contract from another team. Maybe I'm wrong and I'll be blown away by it, but I can't imagine that somebody's going to roll the dice on him with the injuries he has. With a bigger contract. And once again, if we're talking near a minimum one, Pete, I just think he gives the Browns more value than he does any other team because of what he means already in the locker room.
Right. So I assume the Browns have offered him what amounts to be a qualifying offer, which is, according to Jack, about $3 million and only counts for them $1.5 million against the cap. And I'm sure some people are going to be like, well, Nick Chubb's worth more than $3 million, including potentially Nick Chubb's agent. Here's the problem. In addition to the injury issue, all we're hearing about is how great and historic this running back class is. And I think a lot of teams are going to be like, we're going to wait and see how this goes. When there is a class where every team could potentially end up theoretically take a running back and be happy about it, that is not going to be good for older veteran running backs. And I expect you're going to see a whole lot of veteran running backs out of the league, at least at the start of next year. Like the one, and I'll mention him as a good example of this, but also because people were so upset about him in the playoffs. Kareem Hunt, I don't think will be on a team to start the regular season next year. He wasn't on, it was an injury replacement the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But you're going to end up with potentially 35 to 40 running backs who are either going to be drafted or signed as undrafted rookies at a position where they are younger, cheaper, and they can come in and make an immediate impact at that position. So there's not a huge incentive to pay potentially more money to get veteran running backs. And there's certainly the possibility that a team will be more proactive with Chubb and basically look at it like a sort of a risk versus reward venture and try to pay him more money. I don't know if he's willing to actually do that. And what does that amount look like? Is it all incentives? Hard to decipher. But that seemingly is what I'm assuming the Browns offered a qualifying offer. Nick Chubb's camp has basically said, we're going to see what we can get and come back and talk. And if this may play out, have to wait until after the draft. But at some point, and the other part is Nick Chubb's just got to be healthy. Coming off the foot and then continuing to rehab from the knee, he's going to, I think in some ways, want to wait to get as healthy as possible before trying to get really to the bargaining table, because that will maximize his potential earning power whether he's going to have a big workout for teams or not. That just shows I'm really healthy. I'm ready to go. I look more like the old Nick Chubb. And if that's the case, then suddenly he's going to have a real market. It still may not be a ton of money. It still may be heavy incentives, but I think that's where the situation plays out right now. And if that's the case, you've got Jerome Ford, end of list. So it does sort of tip the hand. And to my view, I think the Browns should draft 2 running backs anyway. But it just pushes you more into that direction of it's clear they're going to attack running back in the draft, and they may sign a couple of veterans to league minimum deals to sort of OTAs and stuff. And maybe the Chubb thing gets done sooner because he wants to be there for that stuff. But this thing could play out till after the draft.
Yeah. I mean, you could bring in as many UDFA running backs as you want. This class is so big. I mean, there's 30 draftable guys, basically.
Well, and then, so I've talked about this before in terms of how the Browns sort of have done a really good job in sort of manipulating their draft strategy. And I'll use 2023 as a really good example because this to me is the perfect Browns draft other than Siaki Ika, which was an abomination of a draft process. The Browns took a whole bunch of premium positions at the top of the draft. They go wide receiver, Siaki Ika, defensive tackle. They go corner. They go offensive tackle. They go defensive end. And then they sort of end up with a center. And then whom I think I'm missing one. But anyway, so they sort of manipulated. And that draft wasn't a great safety class. And they sort of manipulated and sort of, I think, looked at the scope of the class. And there were a lot of people who were like looking at guys like Bronny Hickman and saying, man, the Browns should probably take him around 4. And I think the Browns made the evaluation that that the talent from like round 4 to after the draft was pretty even. And I think the Browns basically said to themselves, look, if the guys who are going to end up undrafted are going to be comparable talent level. And if we have a roster that's set up, which sort of shows agents and these players, there's not only room to sort of make to sort of compete for a roster, there's a spot there that says, come to the Browns, you could get real reps and a real opportunity to make the team. And so when the Browns got to undrafted free agency or like after the draft, they were able to sign Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McAllister from Ohio State. And they did this with another position, which I'm failing to think of off the top of my head.
Linebacker.
Was another good example.
Diabate
was a good signing. They also signed my guy, Charlie Thomas III, who I really liked out of Georgia Tech. But so they set up this like natural competition. So like these guys ended up being a really competition. So the Browns end up keeping Hickman, who is certainly more than warranted a draft pick. Diabate is more than warranted a draft pick. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Browns basically, part of the reason they want to wait on Chubb is they present to this draft class that, let's say they only draft 1 running back. And let's say they even go big at running back. Let's say they take one at 33. I'm not loving that idea, but let's say they do it. Let's say they take Caleb Johnson to 33 because he's really good. And the MSRP on Ohio State running backs is too high. For the people who are going to get mad about that. But then they manipulate it, and then they go through the rest of their draft process, and they still have that another running back. I would like them to end up with 4. And they still manipulate the end of that process. So like running back 4 and 5 look really good. And like a lot of these running back, there's a number of these running backs that go undrafted, and then they sign a couple. Competition ensues. Maybe they try to get one to the practice squad. They will keep one to the active roster. And maybe they get another player that you sit there and go, well, that's a kid who could have been drafted. And it sort of extends the reach of your draft in a way that's really good. It's really difficult. Like, again, I think you have to restrict this to players that are at non-premium positions. Safety, linebacker, running back. The Browns messed around did this last year with tight end. It didn't really work out the way they had hoped, but nevertheless, they got that kid from Wyoming who was interesting. But it wouldn't surprise me. This is sort of a thing that the Browns have picked up on, which I think is really smart strategy. Will they end up doing it this way? Unclear, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they could. Again, just to get talented players to sit there and look at the Browns as opposed to some of these other teams where maybe they sign with a team, maybe they've got a really nice offer from somebody else who might maybe even guarantees a little bit more money, but they sit there and go, I don't want to be running back 6.
Yeah.
and then I'm just going to get cut at the end of this. And then I'm going to end up in a place like Cleveland. And maybe you could do that. You take the more money and then end up there. But you might want to go to Cleveland in that scenario because you think, I want to learn their system. I want to be in the best position possible. And I see a path where I not only make the team, but could have a role. And I think that could be something that the Browns explore with running back for this year.
Yeah. It's a great strategy, just giving enough room on the back end of your roster to entice players, UDFAs to thinking there's a path to the field or a path to
because
role.
It's recruiting at that point.
Yes.
You are trying. It's no different than college in that respect. Now there's a financial aspect that now has entered college. It's sort of an NIL type thing in terms of we're going to give you this much money. Yeah, that's certainly valuable. But for a lot of these agents in particular, they're looking at where can my client make a roster spot because they're looking at this and saying, how am I going to get paid ultimately? And it's going to be putting them in the best possible position. And that becomes an enticing recruiting tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's netted them some good players. I mean, we're talking about Hickman potentially competing for a starting spot. Diabate is going to be an impactful part of this room, both from that same class as UDFAs, right? So, all right, this is Andrew Barry's comments. Interesting stuff here on Travis Hunter.
In terms of Travis Hunter, cornerback or receiver, the answer is yes. So he can play both, and I think that's what makes him special. We would see him as a receiver primarily first, but I think part of what makes him a bit of a unicorn is the fact that he can do both at a high level.
Interesting. He says they view him as a wide receiver, Pete. I think he went on later to elaborate a little bit about that his ball skills are just so good that, he's going to touch it X amount of times as a wide receiver. You know what I mean? And 1/3 of that, if they're lucky, as a defensive back. And they look at that as kind of like his superpower, which I agree with. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I always, just from a Brown standpoint, I always thought Travis Hunter made more sense as a receiver. First, because I don't think Travis Hunter is built to play tight man coverage and press and all those things. He's more suited to play off man because he wants to keep his ability to keep his eyes on the quarterback and play the ball because he's phenomenal at that. But if you just look at it from like Andrew Barry's way of thinking, I think is a way a lot of people would look at this in terms of like high school and college, which is you've got this player who's this special. I want to get him the ball more.
Yeah.
I think he said 100 times versus 6. Yes, clearly, like you watch Travis Hunter, he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's special after the catch. I absolutely agree with that assessment on that. But then you take it to the next step and say, well, what about the Browns? Like, I don't want to put him in a situation where he's playing occasional corner. I think that's a really bad idea. The position's just too difficult to play.
Yeah.
Very occasionally. Where I like is basically you invent him a position. It's basically a safety, but you invent him a position where he just gets, obvious passing situations. You have a package where Travis Hunter goes in the game and all he's going to do is go find the ball and play the ball and watch the quarterback and then go after it. Now they may do some coverage things in terms of how they want to use them, like a robber versus a free, those type of things. And maybe there's some man coverage elements in there, but ultimately what I want, if I'm a coach, is I want him to be able to have the freedom to break on a ball as he sees fit and go and make plays on it. Whereas Travis Hunter can hit. Travis Hunter did not make very many tackles in college, which is something that, defense, you got to put guys on the ground. And I also don't love the idea of having him, obviously if you're a receiver, you have to block and you can get hit, but I sort of look at it like Denzel Ward, and I've like, not from a concussion standpoint, just Travis Hunter is not a huge guy. Now he's very strong. He's got a lot of dense muscles and everything else. He's a powerful athlete, but I don't love the idea of him, having him 100 or however many plays a game on defense, 70, 80 plays a game, potentially throwing his body into the mix like Denzel Ward would. I think he will end up getting nicked up over the course of his season. I'd rather him in his position where he's trying not to get hit as much as possible, given how special he is, because if you are playing him theoretically both ways and he gets injured, you lose a whole lot because he's potentially offering you 85 to 100 plays a game. That's a lot you have to then replace. So certainly corner isn't necessarily dangerous, so to speak, but it is physical, more physical than he would be in a lot of wide receiver looks. So I just from what he does well standpoint, I think getting him the ball makes more sense. Being able to put points on the board makes more sense. The possibility, just from a Brown standpoint of putting him on the field with Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku and some of these other things, because he can play X, and he can do a whole lot of things where like that, to me, is an easy thing to get excited about.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And Jeffrey asks here, as you kind of said, you make a position for him. He says, do you see him as a safety? I think like when you say make a position for him, you could almost even just think of it as like what the Browns did with McLeod when all the safeties were healthy. You played 3 safety dime, right? And you have a third safety on the field, and you could manipulate dime packages, have him come in as kind of a safety and have him do what needs to be done based on the formation. But that would be one way that you could get him on the field in special situations potentially.
Whether it's at the combine or if they invite him to what I assume will be one of their 30 visits, I would tell him straight up, we will make a position for you on defense called Hunter or whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
And we're going to put you in packages where, hell, call it the Hunter package, whatever he wants to call it, where you have potentially a dynamic rush package and you have Denzel Ward and all these other guys, and then Hunter can be this particular role, and you can put him on the field and deploy him as you will and give him a whole lot of freedom. Whereas corner has more sort of entrenched responsibilities.
Sure.
Safety gives safety has the ability to play sort of a wild card role, which is what I'd want him to do. Or you let Delpit be the wild card type player and put him all over the place, and then Hunter becomes your free safety. However you want to do it. I just want to let him go after the football.
To this question, and Larry saying, I don't see him as the best wide receiver. MC saying, I've seen some people say Hunter is the best athlete, but not the best wide receiver. True? Question mark. I don't think so. I think he could do either. I think he's actually a very nuanced wide receiver. And, his athleticism, his ball skills are incredible. So, I think either way, you're not going to lose either way, but I think making him a primary player on the offense makes more sense for the reasons that Andrew Berry pointed out.
So a lot depends on what you want to believe in terms of just being able to sort of prove it. He's not going to be the best receiver on sort of what you can prove in terms of data and what he's done. But in terms of potential and what he's capable of, I think you can make the argument he's a wide receiver. I heard Mel Kiper say he'd have him rated ahead of all the wide receivers from last year. I'm not going that far. I do not think he's better than the Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison guys who were full-on wide receivers coming out of college. Is there a world where Travis Hunter could get there? Maybe. But those guys can do it, right? Like you knew what those guys were going to be coming out. So I think there's a case to be made. Personally, I think just in terms of being able to prove it, I think Tetairoa McMillan is a better wide receiver in terms of what he's been able to prove. But, we'll see about the athleticism, what he's going to do in terms of testing. I don't know if he'll do any of the sort of agility stuff, but I think the shuttle and the 3-cone are where he's going to test incredibly special, more so than the straight line speed, though I think his explosion and like his broad jump and stuff could be really impressive. But it's his ability to change direction that you just sit there and you marvel at watching him with the ball in his hands.
I know we're talking about this because he's an interesting prospect. I don't really see a world where the Browns draft him.
Travis Hunter?
Yeah.
I do. 6 or 7.
Okay.
I'm not
Trade
convinced.
back.
I'm not convinced he's going top 5.
Trade back scenario. Yeah.
It's just so difficult. It's just not done very often that you take wide receivers or DBs that high.
Yeah. I've
whether
been
it's
saying this.
Marvin Harrison went 4. That was not normal. Jamar Chase went 6. Malik Neighbors went 6. Teams typically will defer to quarterback or lineman in that scenario. So either the teams above him will take a lineman, like if the Titans take Abdul Carter and it make me hate them forever, then if the Browns are either going to take a quarterback or, in my mind, trade down, and then the Giants are either going to take a quarterback or take, I guess, based on what you just showed that thing from Hayden Winks, I don't know how much of that is just saying the Giants are that enamored with Travis Hunter, and they may be, versus he's the best player. The Giants have sort of a lot of to add if they don't add quarterback. They need to have things all over the place, and they don't need edge rusher or really defensive tackle for that matter. So then it's sort of the next thing would be Travis Hunter.
Yeah. You think, MC's kind of saying what I've been saying all along is if I'm going to draft a guy at wide receiver, to your point, at that high, I want the best guy on the board, which is Tet. And then, potentially. And then if you want the best corner, do you think the best corner is him? Or you think it's the kid from Michigan?
It depends on his health. On what he's proven to this point, I like Will Johnson.
Yeah. So then he kind of falls so then why are you taking him over either of those guys? And that for me is kind of shaky because it is at that point a little bit of a novelty because you can't project out how playing 100 snaps in the NFL is going to really turn out, in my opinion.
I keep playing this out in my head in terms of if the Browns were to trade down with either the Jets or the Raiders, 6 or 7, and both guys are sitting there.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me not to take Travis Hunter in that scenario. And it's like going against what I probably should do in terms of what can be proven. We'll see. Maybe the athletic testing data will sort of help settle it.
Up. Yeah.
I think the worry you have with Tet, who's phenomenal, is that I'm not even sure you call it a worry, but if he's Drake London, which is a very good receiver, is that enough versus what Travis Hunter might be? I think is the question you have to ask yourself. And I think that's a legitimately difficult conversation to have. I'm more than comfortable taking Tet if that's we'll see, again, seeing pending athletic testing. I don't have a problem with taking him in the top 10. I was listening to Mel Kiper he's saying he's potentially in the 12 to 22 range, which again would suggest that edge rushers, some of which I personally think have no business going that high, are going to go in front of guys that shouldn't. And I'm really hoping the Browns avoid them. I really hope they don't draft an edge rusher from Georgia or Texas A&M in the top 10, because I think that's fool's gold and just a horrible idea. But we'll see what they do. And that's where I can prove that both Travis Hunter and Tet McMillan do far more than they have relative to where they've been in their career.
Just in the top 10? Because we're talking about like TJ Sanders and stuff, right?
No. I'm talking about Mykel Williams from Georgia, who I've seen him talk about it too, which is ludicrous.
Yeah,
I get he's 20. I get Georgia plays a weird defense, but no. And then Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, who has 8 more. His junior season, he played 12 games. He had 8 more solo tackles than I did. Like he's had less solo tackles than career games played as what is supposed to be an impact pass rusher. That is a terrifying precedent that will end up would defy all logic in terms of what we've seen from the collegiate level. I get he moves like Jadeveon Clowney and is super explosive. He has 1.5 sacks in like each of the past 3 years. I would, if you're just asking me who I'd rather have, and again, we'll see about athletic testing this week, I would take Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College way before I'd ever take Shamar Stewart. Donovan Ezeraku had like 6 games with at least 2 sacks just this year, and does all the things I want from that position.
What about the level of competition basis there?
He played at BC. He's fine.
They're not the same as the SEC.
He's fine. You get a little bit more of a question with like Mike Green from Marshall, and there are off-field concerns there that I'm not going to get into. Teams can figure that one out for themselves. I certainly out of my comfort range with where the Browns are picking. I'm not really interested in that stuff. That's troubling to say the least. The Browns and everybody else have to do their research on that. But no, to me, I think if the Browns, in a world where Abdul Carter goes 1 and the Browns trade out from 2, which I would project to be either 6 or 7 in that scenario, I'd be looking at Travis Hunter, Tet McMillan, and Mason Graham, who I assume will be gone at 4. But after that, it gets a little wonky, but I think those guys would be there and it wouldn't be another question. At that point, it's really just, if Travis Hunter's off the board, do the Browns try to get cute almost and try to trade down again and still get their guys there and feel good about the fact that they could take Tet McMillan or, Nemeka Ibuka at that point and feel good about it, or somebody else in that next range? Could they get a Will Campbell in the 10 to 15 range, somewhere in that neighborhood?
Who's the third wide receiver in this draft for you?
Well,
it's tough, right?
To me, it's Luther Burden.
Yeah.
Again, based on what he's been able to prove to this point, it's Luther Burden.
What about
about athletic testing? We'll see what he can do athletically. I think his change of direction ability will be special. He's electric with the ball in his hands, and I like the fact he's almost 210. So he's got some heft at that position, and his yards after the catch ability is tremendous, which I think would be a really good fit with the Browns. My only concern with Luther Burden is he's probably, I don't want to say he's limited in the slot because I don't think that, but he might be more suited to play in the slot. And at that point, you do get a little bit weird about that. But at the same point, Emeka Ibuka seems to project towards the slot. Based on data and citing James Coburn, and just off his data projection without considering athletic testing or anything like that, he's JSN. He's Jackson Smith Njigba, and I'm more than happy to have that. Just sign me up.
Yeah. No, I like his film better. I just keep seeing PFF with this Matthew Golden kid from Texas up higher. I need to watch more of his film.
So Matthew Golden's tape this year is tremendous. His ability to concentrate on the football is spectacular. There's one clip where he is able to beat a receiver, sort of gets turned around, does a whole 360, running down the right sideline, relocates the ball and catches it. Like, eyes completely off the ball and manages to get it. So you see in clips remarkable ability to play the ball and do some of these other things. But this is the only year he's done it. He is he's 21. It's not like he's an old guy, but it is a late breakout, relatively speaking. There have been later. Tyler Warren is certainly a later breakout than he is. But it does make you wonder, has he just figured it out and this is who he's going to be? Or is this something you have to be concerned about? Because, and then the thing that sucks with Matthew Golden is, when he got hurt during the playoff game and hurt his foot, and it sort of lost you what was going to be a really good evaluation tool when Texas played Ohio State, to sort of get a really good feel of another great look to see just how good he was against high level competition. So there is a little bit of risk you're taking on because he's sort of a late breakout, but if he's he has a great athletic profile and people talk themselves into the tape, they're going to talk themselves into it. I still think there's a little too much risk for me. I still think I have Luther Burden ahead of him, but unless there's the concerns I've heard with Luther Burden is basically his production dropped off this past year. He wasn't necessarily the go-to guy in some of their big clutch situations. And the question you have to ask or answer with that is why.
Yeah.
But ultimately, still, the film is tremendous. And then Golden, if we're comparing those two, seemingly has more ability to sort of play on the outside, which could be more of interest to the Browns, or at least the flexibility. Again, I think it comes down to where do the Browns really believe a Luther Burden lines up. If they think he can be a consistent inside-outside guy, great. Jerry Jeudy is, I think, a good fit as sort of a 2/3 slot, 1/3 outside type guy.
Yeah.
And really that 1/3 is 2 wide receiver sets.
Yeah.
But I think he's more suited to play in the slot. And then when you add in David Njoku, who's also going to likely be effectively a slot, you don't want to end up in a world where obviously they can use condensed formations. And the Browns use quite a bit of those to sort of junk it up and create the ability to give more options in terms of release. But you do need to get more guys. I think Cedric Tillman is certainly capable. We just got to see him do it more. But that's where you sit there and go, man, I really want to feel good about getting another guy I can line up on the sideline and be like, this is our setup, where like you can picture yourself going, I've got Cedric Tillman on the outside on one side. I've got insert player we've just drafted on the other side, Luther Burden and David Njoku in the middle. And with a veteran quarterback you feel good about, you're like, I can get, we can do something with this.
Yeah. Or just a true X.
Yeah, I mean, Ted McMillan's a true X. I think Travis Hunter can be a true X.
Yeah,
and that the rest of those guys, it's a big question. Cedric Tillman is capable. That is what he is.
Yeah.
But again, I love Cedric Tillman. I think he's a tremendous talent. But I can't sit there and go, no, we're fine. We'll just go with this, and we can't address anything. I am very interested in getting another big-time weapon to add that. And then if Cedric Tillman takes that next step, oh, no, I have 3 really good receivers and a good tight end. Like, this is a problem I'm willing to deal with.
This, and they're bringing it up in the chat to mention some of the guys in this class, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Rose. This class falls off a cliff, though, right? I mean,
it does.
There's not much depth here.
It does, except, and we're going to see what
Bryant.
happens. Because he can make me look like a fool after this week if he tests poorly. My guy, Pat Bryant from Illinois, is a monster. Pat Bryant, 6'2", 200 pounds. His metrics are phenomenal. He dominated at Illinois and played all these teams and just crushed it at every level of the field. Able to get open, able to make contested catches, able to make yards after the catch, able to use his body to create separation during the catch. Pat Bryant's tape is incredible. And then just looking at it from a data standpoint, he's just good. Like, to me, and, this is interesting because Khalil Shakir just signed an extension. I think Buffalo got a great deal. Also very happy for Khalil Shakir. He's a guy I loved coming out of the draft. Yeah. It just would not surprise me if Pat Bryant is that guy where, he's like the 15th wide receiver taken in this class. And then next year or the year after, everybody's going, "What? How the hell did we miss this kid?" And I think he's hiding in plain sight because his tape is legitimately good. He was super productive, and he has the size you want. Can play outside, can play inside. We'll see about the athletic testing. Maybe there's something there. Brett Bielema didn't even recruit him because it was the previous coach. Brett Bielema sort of inherited him and basically said, "Hey, do you still want to come here?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm committed." His story's really interesting. He's a guy, I want to say he's from he's from a rough area of either Florida or New Orleans. And I think it's Florida. And he knows all kinds of people he grew up with who were killed or have gone to jail and everything else. And his whole thing in his recruiting process, I got to get the hell out of here. And he has crushed it in terms of getting out and just being everything that they want to be. I mean, I've watched sort of interviews with Brett Bielema, and Brett Bielema, again, did not recruit him, is like brought to tears talking about this kid because he's everything you want in a football player. So unless his testing is just awful, he's my guy. And if the Browns, even if the Browns were to get a Ted McMillan or Travis Hunter or whatever, it'd be really hard for me to pass up a Pat Bryant later in the draft. And I'm sure he's watching because I'm sure he's just a monster Browns fan. But Pat Bryant, phenomenal player. I'm all about it. He's one of the guys in this draft who, him, TJ Sanders, Donovan Ezraku, again, we'll see how these guys test and everything, but those are guys I'm pounding the table for.
Love that. I can't wait to watch some more Pat Bryant. But yeah, intriguing stuff there.
His metrics are better than both Travis Hunter and Ted McMillan. Just apples to apples comparison, his are better. Yeah.
We'll see. This is going to be an illuminating weekend for some of these guys, right? It's big stuff. This measurements and 40 times and shuttles and all that will, for some guys, especially wide receivers, will loom large. Cam Ward's hand size, that'll be big.
I don't think that one's going to end well. But yes, it's the whole thing. If he's over 9 inches, like in terms of if he's like 9, if he just hits 9, it's Jacksonville he's from. For the record, Pat Bryant's from Jacksonville. If he just hits 9 at that point, if Abdul Carter goes 1, I'm perfectly happy with taking Cam Ward and being done with it. Now I don't know if the Browns will feel that way, but I'm good.
Ever since you said that, in every film frame I watch of him, I'm looking at his hands, like trying to evaluate.
Watch the latest little thing where him and Shador are working out, and he's giving him crap. They look like mittens.
All right, this is AB after his presser today. You're watching the React, by the way, on the OBR streaming network. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. In the description below, there's a link to the OBR. Get over there and follow all of our insiders and all of Pete's writing as we have you covered wall-to-wall coverage for the Browns, mock draft daily, all that stuff. So hit that link and go check out the website. Hit like and subscribe. And if you're on X, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. All right, here we are with AB after his press availability on Cleveland Browns Daily with some more questions here and then some reaction to his press availability with Siciliano and a very interesting one that I know you're going to love, Pete, with Ryan Wilson.
Draft, and you mentioned quarterbacks and also some of the best players. So I want to kind of go through some of the positions and just what are the traits that you're looking for? We'll start with quarterback, obviously. What are the traits that you're looking for, and how do you as a scout combine that with, or the general manager combine that with what a coach is looking for and get kind of that holistic picture?
So I'd say this, let me maybe zoom out a little bit, Nate. When you're picking at the top of the draft, you want to find unique players, and you want to find players that can impact the game. While also realizing that each draft class is different. Like, I'm not a huge believer in comparing draft class to draft class to draft class because those set of players are different and you're not making decisions on them. I think the second thing is usually the top of the draft is young players or age combined with, some level of early production and then the physical characteristics that would allow them to get into whether it's get into the rotation or getting into a starting position early to then get NFL experience. Those are usually the guys that that get picked high, with some exceptions. So those are some of the profiles that we would be looking for, and that's like, let's say, position agnostic. When it comes to matching a player to scheme, I'd say this: when you're picking high and you're looking for unique players, it really goes the other way around, because there are only a handful of players that are true difference makers in the sport. Mm-hmm. And they really should transcend scheme for your organization.
So he starts to answer that question about fit and traits. And then Bo asks basically the same question again, but it's his answer is very interesting about fit. You know what I mean? Go ahead. If you have something.
Yeah, so hopefully that means that I can cross out Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart right off the rip because he said production and they don't have any.
Yeah.
But in terms of like talk about unique players and stuff, and I remember, and obviously this still comes up, but like let's use Abdul Carter as an example. Like people are like, I don't know if he fits the scheme.
Yeah.
If he doesn't fit your scheme, you fire the defensive
Make it
coordinator
fit.
and find somebody
Yeah.
who can fit him into the scheme because he's that good. Like Jim Schwartz can easily do that. He's done it. He had Cliff Averill, who is basically 6'2", 250, played defensive end for him. We see this all the time. Von Miller played in an even front. We're seeing guys do it now. The Nolan Smith from the Philadelphia Eagles plays defensive end. Like, so that's not a concern. But if a defensive coordinator was ever to come up to me and be like, "Nah, I can't find a place for this very special talent. It's time to get a new coach." Like, that would be a huge problem. You have to be able to figure that out and make your scheme work for that guy. If they're that good, if they're that special, and getting unique players. Now that may tell us some things right off the rip, but I think there's nothing I disagree with because he can't get specific, but those are things that should be pretty obvious.
He goes into a little more detail here as on fit versus traits here with Bo's question.
And obviously at quarterback, that's a big part of it. And I'm not trying to get you into that spot necessarily, but what percentage of these traits will make work versus these traits work with what we do?
Yeah, I don't think there's a hard and fast
There
rule.
isn't.
And the reality of it is, like, first and foremost, you want to get unique and impactful players. If you have unique and impactful players, you have smart coaches, and it may be a little bit different than they've been accustomed to, they'll adjust. I mentioned up at the podium this example, like Lamar Jackson, for instance. I know he didn't necessarily go at the top of the draft, but he had some rare and unique characteristics. And when Baltimore selected them, they were running a completely different scheme. And when they inserted him to the lineup, I think they were 4 and 5 at the time. They shifted, right? They shifted mid-season, went on a run, get to the playoffs, and then the following year they totally revamped their offense. And they did it because he was unique and he could impact the game in a rare and special way. And that's one of the many reasons that that John Harbaugh is an excellent coach. And our coach is not too shabby either. So we'll prioritize impact and make the necessary adjustments if that comes to play.
I'm sure there's a weighted system positionally too, right? So like, that special trait at its position that matters most, and you have those kind of charted as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to sit here and say that positional value doesn't matter, but I always say, like, our first order of business is get difference-making players and guys who can impact the game. I think it can be easy to get maybe a little bit too cute with that stuff, especially when you're picking high, because again, there are only so many blue chip players. The fit schematic thing, that probably becomes more of an issue as you get with players that have more flaws as you get deeper into the draft, or maybe you're shopping economically in the UFA market or the trade
Makes
market.
sense.
Then that becomes a little bit more important. But the first order is finding players who can uniquely impact the game.
So what I heard is they're not drafting Shedeur Sanders. I'll just say it straight out.
You heard that from that?
No special, unless his brain power is so special. I have nothing against Shedeur Sanders, but like, what are his special traits?
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I'm just saying, like,
that's what I hear. We're not drafting Shedeur Sanders because he doesn't have special enough traits. Like, but like beyond that,
I don't know how he feels about him. Certainly, we don't see that, but they may think that he is, that his superpower or his special trait is his processing and touch and accuracy.
Could be. I'm going to go with no. The other part of that, which I continue to get from people, is like they continue to try to shoehorn a very specific style, and Shedeur Sanders sort of fits into it, relative to Kevin Stefanski. And then the way I would put it is people want to find the Kirk Cousinsiest quarterback for Kevin Stefanski and go, oh, he fits his system. And I don't disagree that Shedeur Sanders would fit Stefanski's system, but he's shown he's played with any number of different quarterbacks, and I think people are so poisoned by Deshaun Watson, and I get it. It's a traumatic experience watching him suck, but they've used different quarterbacks with different athletic skill sets, with different talent, and won football games. And to me, Cam Ward, of those two, if you're talking about the top of the draft, has some special characteristics where you can be like, yeah, I will figure it out around him. His arm strength is that good. His ability, his just playmaking ability as a thrower can be that good. His footwork is really impressive, but it's just his arm and his playmaking ability. We sit there and go, wow, at times. And those are traits that I think are special enough where I think it's very easy for Kevin Stefanski to go, I can make this work. I'm going to get him, obviously they've got to meet with him and interview him and all those things and get a feel for how coachable he is.
Yeah.
And how good they feel about his ability to basically be coached out of doing the dumb stuff, like throwing back across the field into an arm punt to Noah Williams of Cal for an interception. But there's situations that are a little bit different, but Josh Allen did that crap at Wyoming. And he ultimately has gotten to a point where he's stopped doing those things. If they feel like, and Kim Ward is not Josh Allen in terms of like overall physical talent, with the size and strength and everything else, but his arm and his playmaking ability is special enough where, you might sit there and go, yeah, I can make this other stuff work. And I can craft my offense around what he does well.
Just to play devil's advocate, because I agree that Cam Ward appears to be, he's obviously has a higher upside and has more ability than Shedeur does. Shedeur is just more polished at this point in his career. Now, what do you say to Daniel Jeremiah's grading that Cam Ward has the same grade of prospect as Bo Nix did last year?
I guess I disagree with his assessment.
Right. So you think Cam Ward is better than
I do, but again, I'm disinclined to like Bo Nix. One, I was very scarred from watching Bo Nix play at Auburn and having to watch all of the tapes of Anthony Schwartz at Auburn, watching Bo Nix just throw it to God knows where. Was also 24 by the time he got a lot better over the course of his career. I still was a little bit skeptical that he would be as effective as he was as a rookie, and we'll see what happens. If he goes on to be great, then he's proven me completely wrong. It's the same thing with Michael Penix. Michael Penix, also older prospect. So I'm already inclined to be a little bit more towards Cam Ward. He's a little bit younger, but also the playmaking ability. To me, I think Cam Ward has more of it, where Bo Nix was a little bit safer in terms of decision-making and not making the risky plays and sort of doing the right plays, where Cam Ward has the ability to make the big plays. And a lot of that just comes down to how do you assess that? How do you assess playmaking ability versus the risk-taking? Bo Nix was a little bit safer, but not as big of a playmaker. Now, having said that, Bo Nix, his arm in Denver has surprised me. Obviously, that throw against the Browns was pretty damn good, where he goes all the way down the field against inverted two, and you're just like, where'd that come from? I still think Cam Ward has a little bit more juice on his arm. But, I would say this. I don't think there's a huge difference between Cam Ward and Bo Nix. Like, I don't think it's ludicrous to have them in the same conversation. I just think the areas where I have Nix better, or I should say Ward a little bit better, are just enough to get me past it. I think they're relatively close as quarterback prospects.
Interesting. All right. Very good. That is interesting. I found that to be good. And then he went on to, let me make sure I got the right one here as we bring this up. The next video here from today. Where's AB with the roster? what we're going to get to next here on the React.
In terms of being able to really compete and get back to where we were 2 years ago, right? Go to the playoffs, win 11 games. Is it a few minor tweaks? Is it a few things? Where do you when you say transition, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's what I talked about earlier in terms of, creating some opportunity for some of the younger players.
Guys like Isaiah McGuire who stepped up.
And Nate, I would say that, like, I'm not really necessarily in the prediction business in terms of that comes. Like, want to focus on having the right process in place. Because ultimately what our goal is, we want to compete year in, year out for divisions, championships, and Super Bowls. So we're going to make the moves that allow us to do that. Look, it's February right now, so we've got 7 months till we play. So who knows what the roster is going to look like by the time that we get there.
Love that.
Well, I mean, this whole thing is like trying to get the best 90 to get down to the best 53. So you're going to have a lot of change in that. Certainly, you got the draft picks, free agency, those things are going to change. So you could easily see a quarter of the roster. I mean, just the draft could flip over, just a substantial amount of the roster. So, and that's the nature of the beast. Like you generally churn about a third. Just naturally year to year, and the Browns have more things that they want to accomplish, so it's going to be a little bit more probably. So yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of work to do, and yes, they do need to create more situations for young players. Certainly, the defensive side of the ball has more of those. The offense needs their share. The offense needs, and they may not see the field this year. I mean, perfect world, they don't. Offensive line wise, I only want to see one young player on the field this year, and that's DeJuan Jones. Everybody else is, older guys, so be it. But I want to have the guys in place so that when Bitonio does retire and the Browns at least want to give themselves the option where they can think about life, whether it's just moving on from Teller or Conklin or whatever, where they can sit there and go, I've got two guards ready to step in. And I didn't just add them for now. I had them in a year, and Mike Bloomgren was able to get these guys ready to go, and we're ready to step in and compete already. So I certainly want them to improve the roster and get them to a situation where they can compete now. But they also have to be, and we'll use Barry speak, you got to think short-term and long-term. Short-term, they've got quarterback is the number one thing for them to sort out. But long-term, quarterback might be different. The offensive line might be significantly different. Where running back is a very short-term conversation right now because it's Jerome Ford, and that's it right this second. So there's a lot of things they have to tweak and a lot of things they have to get better. So a lot of opportunity for them to add talent and improve and juice up different areas of the team. But obviously, you and I have sort of talked about this. We'd like to see a lot of that investment on the offensive side of the ball because that has more to prove. And I would say proof. It does have plenty of proof, but also needs things that are going to be there beyond one more year.
Yes. I was just going to ignore this, but I'm going to bring up the question now because Amber, I didn't know it was a real question. I thought you were being sarcastic because I think that obviously we realize this. So she's a Shedeur. We haven't said anything bad about Shedeur on the show the entire night. But Pete, do you realize a QB can get stronger? Have you considered that you might get bigger for the NFL? Pete, can you answer my question if you don't mind? So I thought you were being sarcastic, Amber, because obviously we realize that, and most human beings would realize that. But if you really want us to answer that, I'll let Pete handle that for you.
Here's the problem. Shedeur is 23 years old, and not to say that there are not 23-year-olds who can get stronger. However, he is the son of Deion Sanders, who is not only very wealthy, but is well-connected relative to athletics. So Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh and any other Sanders have had access to nutrition, training, personalized, everything can be personalized just for them. It is not a situation where you are taking somebody who, grew up in a rough situation where maybe they didn't get all these advantages, and maybe didn't even really lift until they got to college, and maybe they went to a program that didn't have a great weight program, that maybe was FCS or lower. And then you can talk yourselves into this rapid growth of physical development, or their frame is just built in a way where you can see stacking weight on top of this person. Shedeur is not that person. He got a pretty small frame, relatively speaking. He's had all the advantages he could possibly have, and he's an overachiever already. So I don't assume that like he's basically been, not trying to maximize his physical potential basically the last almost 10 years of his life. So I think he is what he is. There are certain things he can do that can sort of, I think, can improve around the sort of fringes. I think there are things he can do to sort of improve his arm strength a little bit. I think there are things he can do to get a little bit quicker. But overall, like, I don't see 10 more pounds coming on Shedeur Sanders. It's going to be pure muscle or anything like that. I think he is largely what he is. He's been at this for long enough, had all the advantages he could possibly ask for. So I think that is wishful thinking ultimately. And he can prove me wrong. And maybe he's going to show up to the combine and be, 250 and jacked. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to struggle to be my prediction is going to be around 200 pounds, and maybe he's water weighted himself up, but he's not working out. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. I would then want to see what does he weigh at pro day when he works out. But if he's like 206, 207, like, okay, but I don't think he's going to get much bigger than that. I think that's just what he is.
Yeah. He said, I mean, and like you said, we could be wrong, and hopefully he proves us wrong. And this isn't an indictment by any way, Amber, that he can't be a good quarterback. He can still be a good quarterback at the size he is. But he's had the world's greatest, nutritionists and trainers that you can possibly get. So I'm sure they've tried to add muscle onto him as he grew up especially through his growth spurts, through high school and whatnot.
He's a 5-year collegiate at this point. Like,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Again, he's been at this, and he's not in a position like that's just naturally inclined to just continue to add bulk. I think, I think Sanders is by nature is somebody who actually probably has a difficult time keeping weight on.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a battle for him. It would not shock me at all if you found out that like Shedeur was a guy who was like waking up at 3 a.m. and eating a couple peanut butter sandwiches, like on top of everything else he was doing in hopes to gain strength. And he is what he is. Like, I just think physically he's going to be less than what you want. Does that prevent him from being a great quarterback in the NFL? No, but I do think it is very risky to think that's something that you can expect from him.
And Jaden Daniels isn't that big, but he is a different caliber of athlete as well.
Not only that, everybody.
Right?
Everybody sits there and watches him slam into things and is worried he's going to break.
Yeah.
Like, he has no regard for his body. And everybody's terrified that he's going to hurt himself. And he's also an electric athlete in terms of his athleticism, his speed and quickness and everything else. And he's got a much bigger arm than Shedeur does. So like, he's just physically better. I mean, his 200 pounds is a hell of a lot different than what Shedeur's 206 or whatever it will be. Again, like, that was a concern for Jaden Daniels coming out. Jaden Daniels has been phenomenal, but there were definitely people going, I don't know if he's going to hold up in the NFL. People say this about Bryce Young. People say this about Kyler Murray. Now, I don't think Shedeur is quite in that camp, but they're absolutely, I mean, you're watching a team, like, everybody sits there and goes, oh my God, DTR is going to break. And unfortunately for him, it's sort of proven to be true to this point.
Yeah.
I fully expect that when we get, to the bottom of this, DTR is going to end up being bigger than Shador, and I think that's going to scare people quite a bit with him. Credit to Shador, he has been unbelievably durable and tough in college, but at some point that will run out, I suspect, and bad luck will hit him. Maybe not, but it's a very different world, and when he gets to the NFL, and guys like Myles Garrett are potentially putting Shador on the ground, and he may not get up after a while.
And once again, Amber, you're saying people can be wrong about Shador. Absolutely, but I'm not saying he's even going to be bad. We're just comparing one prospect to another. So I'm not saying he's going to be a bad quarterback. I think he can be successful. There's certainly a path for him in the right city and the right offense.
Good is not good enough with the number 2 overall pick.
That is the
good point. Is perfectly good, perfectly worth it in 33rd pick.
Yes.
At number 2, you need great. And I'm not ruling out the possibility that he can't be great. But if you're asking me to bet, I think he's far more likely to end up good. And there will be people who want to tell me, the Browns could definitely use good. And I understand that. But then we will get to the same place where a lot of people were with Baker Mayfield, where they will just decide good is not good enough, and we've got to get better. We've got to get top 10 on top of everything else. And you're watching teams like the Buffalo Bills and all these other and the Baltimore Ravens who have a top 10 quarterback and had a stacked roster, and they still haven't even been to the Super Bowl. Like, that is how difficult it is. So going from bad to pretty good, not a huge feat. Going from pretty good to great, that is where things get far more difficult and far more limiting. And again, so if Shador can end up being Tom Brady, more power to him. Like, he will absolutely prove me wrong in terms of where I projected him to go. I think he's a 2nd-round pick. And that is, he may find that insulting, but in general, that's still pretty good for a college quarterback to the NFL. It's just not probably what he wants or what you want.
All right, next video. This is Ryan Wilson with the guys on CBD talking about quarterback.
Here on this one, because Nathan and I are proponent for 2 and more at quarterback. Take 1 at 2, take 1 in the 3rd round too. Is there a guy, a mid-round guy that you like that jumps out at quarterback?
And I love that philosophy, by the way. We made fun of Washington when they did it with Kirk Cousins and RG3.
Just fine.
As many at bats as possible.
Absolutely, because you don't have I say if you have 21 Hall of Famers and no quarterback, you're not winning playoff games. So absolutely.
Can we put you on the payroll? Like, that's all.
Nothing else matters.
We've been saying this for a month and a half.
Nothing else matters.
That's it.
It's not.
You don't have a
There it is.
Incorrect, because the Ravens and Bills do not have not even been to the Super Bowl yet. So and that's a worry I have. I don't disagree. Quarterback is hugely important. You're not going to go anywhere without a good quarterback, ultimately. Though the Browns did get to the playoffs with average quarterback play. The Steelers got to the playoffs with a slightly above average quarterback play. I don't disagree with Nathan Zagura's overall premise that to consistently compete year in and year out, you need good quarterback play. What I disagree with and what I worry about is we put an outsized importance on quarterback at the expense of everything else.
Yeah.
If we pause to just focus on quarterback, and obviously they have other signings and other picks and everything else that they can make, but the number 2 pick is a huge resource in terms of opportunity cost to either take another player or trade down and get multiple picks that lead to multiple players.
You can't screw it up.
It is daunting. And one, I will use the Arizona Cardinals because Arizona Cardinals took Josh Rosen 10th overall one year, then took Kyler Murray 1st overall the next year. They have yet to win a playoff game. They've been to the playoffs once. They have 1 winning record. But not beyond that, like beyond the concept of taking quarterbacks in back-to-back years. And if you have to do it, I get it. But the opportunity cost of like going back and looking at one, what did the Cardinals have to give up to trade to get to 10? And then just looking at what they could have gotten at 10. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Vita Vea. Like, if you have Kyler Murray and you add Minkah Fitzpatrick, Vita Vea, you are really, really good. And yes, the Eagles are a I mean, second round quarterback. I think he was 5th or 6th taken in that draft. I struggle to put Hurts in the top 12 quarterback conversation. There are games he's been a quarterback. I mean, one year he was legitimately an MVP candidate. Like 1 year he was genuinely phenomenal before he got the big contract. But
year to year, I don't have him in the top 12.
Yeah, so year to year, or sort of like even this past year, there were games where I thought he was a liability.
Yes,
and I thought the roster strength, which is a testament to the Eagles and the way their philosophy, which is what I hope the Browns embrace. And I know Andrew Berry does to a point. Just get good players. Just get as many great players as you can. Not only great players, but great players at important spots. And yes, quarterback is super important, but also defensive line, secondary, wide receivers, offensive line. Like those are the positions that are going to be game changers for you.
They had weapons. They have incredible weapons on the outside and are an excellent tight end. And they went away from the pass game and simplified it and became more and more towards the run game because that was the way they found the best way to get wins.
Okay, so hold on. So to answer your question about how much of that is Kyler Murray's fault, it's not. Other than the injury part was unfortunate, and the Call of Duty stuff, if those allegations are true, those are his fault. I don't put that on him. What I'm saying is, by virtue of putting that much emphasis just on that position, it hurt them everywhere else. Yeah. Ultimately, and this is the same thing for the people who are like, the Browns shouldn't have taken Myles Garrett. They should have taken a quarterback. One decision is ultimately not going to decide the whole thing, other than if you try to trade for Deshaun Watson. They had numerous opportunities to get other things right. Kyler Murray's fine. I don't, again, I think he's more in the year to year, probably 13 to 19 range. I think he has the capability to get sort of close to 10. Yeah. And if he had a really good team, I think they could get to the postseason and compete. Agreed. But they don't or haven't. And so Kyler Murray by himself is not getting them anywhere. And that is sort of the approach to the extreme, I suppose, of where they want to get. Now, you want to go really extreme. The team that I will cite that the Baltimore Colts took Art Schlichter in 1982, who got suspended for gambling and ended up in jail. And then following year, they took John Elway, who held out and got traded to the Denver Broncos. 1984, they moved to Indianapolis. So that's the super extreme version where you take quarterbacks in back-to-back years and then the team moves. But ultimately, I that's my worry, is outsized importance on the quarterback position to the point where it's detrimental to everything else. And again, I think Cam Ward is good enough, assuming his hands are big enough for the AFC North, to make that play at 2. I don't feel that way about any other quarterback in this class, even the other quarterbacks I like. And I think if you're not getting him, and if I'm wrong and it's an optical illusion that I think he has mittens, then you should try to maximize that pick in every other way you can. If Abdul Carter's sitting there, that's easy. But if not, trade down and try to get more assets, especially if you could trade down to 6 or 7 and get their next year's first round pick.
Yes.
And have more of those things, get an impact player, and just find more ways to build your team overall, because the Browns could use a lot of things. Certainly quarterback matters, and they have to get that right. I just think you gotta be conscious of, if the Browns just sub their board and the first thing they do is, they're at pick 2, and the first thing they do in terms of looking at quarterback is suddenly they're going down here to go get the guy. That is of concern to me. I think that's where you are detrimental, where you're just giving up too much value there. It's not good enough to make that move. You've got to maximize that value. You've got to maximize that pick in terms of the return it can get there. You're going to get more opportunities to get the quarterback position right. You're going to get more opportunities to find somebody you might like better, might fit better. You got to take guys you love. You got to take guys you feel really good about with that level of a pick. And that's where I worry about forcing it or just taking somebody because they need a quarterback.
Jim, has been talking about Will Howard in here, and I am inclined to kind of be on this bandwagon a little bit that I do like Will Howard's game. The question is, how much do we like Will Howard's game? And I think some of this is still to be determined because as I've watched 4 games of his cut-ups, right? And I told this to Casey. I think he's got great touch. I think he processes really well, and stuff. But like, I've yet to see him throw a ball from the hash to the field side, and beat a safety in like the honey hole. You know what I mean? And that kind of throw, I don't know if he has access to that with his arm. I would tend to think not if I haven't seen it in 4 games. The question is, maybe it just wasn't there. Maybe he does have that arm strength. Where are you at with Howard?
I think he's all touch because I don't think he has that.
You
that
don't
velocity.
think he has any arm
I don't
strength?
think he has that true game-changing arm strength. I think if you take him, you are basically hoping that about a year or 2 with technique and training that you're going to get that out of him. But year 1, no. I don't see it. I think he's going to throw lollipops too much. And I think his touch is tremendous. Like, it's a great tool to have. That just can't be the whole thing.
But he doesn't always throw lollipops in his games.
I describe everything he throws as a 3-pointer. There's always an arc.
No.
Yes. Yeah.
No. I've seen him throw darts into tight windows. They had not been far down the field.
Well, there you go.
What? Well, I'm not saying that, but like,
is he throwing that 18-yard square in? Like,
I know that's my question, but like, well, at times, yes, but does it translate to the NFL is a question. I think he's got to get better at it, because I do think NFL speed is going to punish him. And not having Ohio State wide receivers. I agree. I think he does a lot of things really well. I do think he's got to get better at processing certain things on defense. He got fooled too many times on squat coverage looks. Obviously, the pick 6 against Michigan, the pick 6 against Penn State. I think his processing is better than most in this class.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just those are game-losing plays, as we saw. Like, they're down 14-0 against Penn State almost right off the rip.
And once again, not an Ohio State fan, just by the way.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
when you carry that over the NFL, like, you can't really afford to immediately be down in that hole. So much of what I think Will Howard does a good job for the most part processing. I think he does a pretty good job in terms of anticipation. I think he gets fooled too many times in coverage, which is something that he can continue to work on, continue to improve. I think there are times where he's irrationally confident in what he thinks he sees and just throws it, and will get caught by an underneath linebacker or somebody sitting on a pass. I do think the Ohio State talent really helps. I do think he struggles a little bit under pressure. I think he went on a hell of a run in the playoffs, so there's reason to believe that it's going to get better, or they can get better. But I think he's closer to being Mason Rudolph than a great quarterback. And again, that's why I'm putting sort of a 1 to 2 year timeline of if he can get these other things, then he can be not just he can be a great starter, but he's got to get those things right. And those can be, I think, sort of fatal flaws for him.
Don't you think, isn't it possible with his size that the proper training could help with the arm strength if they get him to use his hips more and whatnot?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying 1 to 2 years as opposed to never.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not easy. There are technical things he can do that could potentially help, but he's also just got to continue to develop those muscles and that muscle memory, which is reps and time and effort and all those things. Because, like, I use Tim Tebow as an example. Like, you'd hear, oh man, he put all this effort into refining his throwing motion, and in workouts and stuff where you can think about it and sort of go through it. Yeah, it looked good. But then, like, you get him into a game and now it's default to your basic training, suddenly that windmill is coming back out and like the arm motion sort of falls apart. So it's time, it's energy, like it's a deliberate process of getting better at those things. That like Aaron Rodgers is another great example where Aaron Rodgers from Cal to Packers, they tore down and rebuilt his throwing motion from the ground up. It's completely different. So I'm not suggesting Will Howard needs to go to that extreme, but it does suggest to me that there are things that need to be done that will take time and energy. And it's really hard to do those things on the field where suddenly you default to survival mode and your muscles sort of revert back to what they're used to doing to your training. I mean, you talked about the thing, how long does it take to master the whole 10,000 reps thing? That takes a long time to get to in terms of both just individual training and then actually doing it on the field. So that's why I would say it's going to take him a couple years to get where he needs to go to, assuming he can get there. And it's not a guarantee. But if he can get there, I think you can feel really good about him. The question is, where do you draft 2 years from now? Where do you feel good about that? And that's
I guess I'm just really intrigued by what he was able to do against the best defenses in the country in the playoffs, where he looked almost flawless at times in those games.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but he had a great run. There's no getting around. He had a great run. And again, just because I'm saying it takes a year or two from now doesn't mean that ability you saw isn't there. It's just I think they need more. There's more there that needs to be developed, to make it in the NFL where he can throw that arcing lollipop throw down the field, and he knows that Jeremiah Smith's going to go get it, or he knows that Emeka Egbuka is going to go get it. Like those things are very useful to have when you can just count on the fact that you've got arguably the best wide receivers in America. And I don't want to detract from Will Howard, but you just sort of have to consider those things in your evaluation. Like how much is Will Howard versus how much is everything else? Again, there's talent.
No, I get that. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's going to take a little bit longer than I think some people who may or may not have scarlet colored glasses, and I'm not including you in this, may take a little bit longer than those folks would like to have happen.
How do you compare him to a Shao, or how do you say his name? That kid's name do you say it differently? Is it Scow?
No,
Shao?
I don't know. It's either Shuck or something. Shuck,
Shuck.
whatever. He's 150 years old. I don't care. Like I am fascinated by the people who are just like pounding the table for him. He's about to be 26. He's played 7 years of college football. If he doesn't look good now, like, what are we doing?
Shuck.
Yeah.
Well, how is that his name? There's no CK. There's nothing even close to that. How is that his name?
Well, he's been in college for 7 years. He had a whole lot of time to work it out.
Yeah.
I get it, man. He's big. I get it. He their arm is huge, but he is so much Brandon Weeden in terms of the things you liked about Brandon Weeden. If you liked Brandon Weeden, I did not.
It's German. Hooked and
the other problem with Shuck is a lot of the reason he hasn't played a ton of football is because he's been injured. Look, Tyler Shuck was in the same recruiting class as Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, who's already signed a contract extension.
He was.
Yes, he's in the same recruiting class as DTR.
That's crazy. All right, what about
for quarterback ranking? Trevor Lawrence was number 1, DTR was number 9, Tyler Shuck was like number 10.
All right,
all at the same time coming out of high school. That is how long he's been in college. And like, there are people who are like, well, he's going to get better in the NFL. It's like, if my choice, and I know how much people hate DTR, which I still think is preposterous. I still like the kid. But if you're asking me, would I rather have DTR going into his 3rd year in the NFL, having played against NFL teams, or Tyler Shuck as a mid-round draft pick this year? Give me DTR easily. Not even close.
Well, not knowing what he's going to be at this point, but I get your point.
But this is the thing. Like, I'm saying this as somebody who's seen DTR play NFL, and all these people are like, DTR sucks. I still take DTR now over Tyler Shuck for a mid-round pick.
Yeah. So He'll be 26 by the time he's drafted. Is that true?
No, he'll be
No.
26, I think, in September.
Okay.
But still 26.
So he went to school for like 7 years.
Yes, Dr. Shuck.
No,
PhD.
well, hey, listen, let's take it easy. I went to school for about 7 years
Well,
to
Dr.
get my
Ward,
bachelor's degree.
PhD.
Yeah, I know PhD, just a lot of
Now,
degenerate
to
behavior.
Tyler Shuck's credit, he's got 3 degrees. More power to him. He's smart.
Well, he was using his time much more productively than I was.
But still, like, this
but
is
the-
like, I don't know if Greg Cosell actually said he was his number 2 quarterback, or if he just sort of said, I really like him and I understand why people could look at him like this. All I'm saying is there's over 4 years of difference between him and Jackson Dart in terms of age. Like, whatever you think Shuck can do, I would like to think Jackson Dart is going to learn that over the course of 4 years.
Yeah.
And you have to consider that. Now, I understand the idea is Tyler Shuck now versus Jackson Dart 4 years from now. But it's the same deal with, like, just in general with age. Like, I'm going to take guys who are younger, who excelled earlier. Jackson Dart has a couple really great seasons, at 20 and 21, as opposed to Tyler Shuck, who nobody was really talking about Louisville this year. Like, how often were you sitting there going, man, I got to tune in for Louisville? This Tyler Shuck is like, and then, some of this, there is a natural maturing process and sort of draft evaluation where you may not get to everybody right off the rip, but it's not as if he was playing at North Dakota State and you just didn't get to him because, you don't generally see them.
Right. Yeah.
Louisville's in the ACC, like they were, that plays real schedule, and nobody was sitting there going, man, you gotta check this kid out. He's going to save your franchise.
What about okay, so last 2 questions here. We gotta get out of here for garage beers in a minute here. But so get your beers ready for garage beers. They're up next. But what about Kyle Honda McCord and then your guy?
Jackson Dart?
No.
You my
sleeper.
dude Brady Cook.
Brady.
Yeah, Brady Cook, metrically, like in terms of like the advanced data, he's got data that's comparable to Derek Carr in terms of like just getting it done. He's not, his numbers aren't pretty. I think he threw for 3,000 yards over 1 year.
Yeah.
He's a tough SOB. He played through a torn labrum in 2022. He's played through multiple knee injuries where like he missed like a half of football in one game while he's getting x-rays and everything at the hospital. Came back and played. He almost beat Georgia twice, beat Ohio State in the bowl game. And people don't, one of the many times people wanted to fire Ryan Day, it's because that dude came up with a clutch touchdown to beat him. He can win with his arm. He can win with his legs. I think he's got a little bit of juice in terms of his throws. Is there stuff that he needs to work on? Yeah, he's not great in the intermediate area of the field. But, in terms of the stuff I look for, 3-year starter, check. 3 years in Missouri. Missouri kid who wanted to go to Missouri his whole life. He's not a guy who's played at 14 different programs to find his way on the field. He got there, Eli Drunkowitz's boy, and excelled. It played 3 years as a starter, back-to-back 10-win seasons at Missouri, SEC program at a school that's not accustomed to doing that well in the SEC. Tough kid. Just like if you're asking me in the 6th or 7th round, I'm more than happy to take a flyer like that. Kyle McCord, big arm, relatively speaking, not Cam Ward big, but good arm. Does not offer you much of anything in terms of mobility. Good size. He's a good 20 pounds heavier than Shedeur Sanders, so he's got that going for him. The thing you sort of like about Kyle McCord is the same thing you don't like about Kyle McCord. He's going to throw it.
Yeah.
He's going to give his receivers chances to make plays. So I think this past year he had like 36 big-time throws per PFF, which is a ton. He also had 24 turnover-worthy throws because he's just going to throw it. So
I was going to ask you, how do you how do you measure like what you saw from him at Ohio State versus what you saw at Syracuse this year?
Yeah, I don't know. One, he was better under pressure this year than Ohio State was bad under pressure. But again, he just throws it. So that is a very volatile way to play. I mean, we saw it with Joe Flacco. So there's an argument you can make where Kyle McCord has the things you like that Joe Flacco had, where he's going to throw it, give your guys a lot of chances to make plays, but he's going to throw a few away. And that definitely happened. Kyle McCord, a lot of success this year that he didn't have in previous years, but you can watch him. He makes a lot of good throws. I get it. Not my style preference.
Yeah.
I think, I'll get yelled at for this. I think Shedeur Sanders is a far more talented quarterback than Kyle McCord. But when I add in the negative plays from Shedeur Sanders and then I sort of level that out against Kyle McCord, I think you're going to get more value for Kyle McCord where he's going to get drafted, assuming he's day 3. If he goes day 2, it's a little bit more sketchy. Like if he's in the 3rd round, I think all bets are off. But if you get him in the 4th or 5th round versus getting Shedeur in the 1st round, I think you're going to be happier than what you get in return for Kyle McCord. The chances of him being a starter at that point aren't very high, but I think he's got a reasonable chance of ending up as a starter. It's just a question of how high a level that is. So, I mean, stylistically, I prefer Brady Cook. I understand why people like McCord. I have a very difficult time with pure pocket passers in the way the NFL is going, with the way the offensive line play has gone, with the way pass rushers are going. I think it is really, really difficult to be exclusively a pocket passer because you have to process at such a high level and teams can throw pressure packages at you. You just don't have time. And even as I'm an advocate for signing Kirk Cousins, again, I watched games. You're just like, they're sending double A gap pressure and he cannot move. He's not going anywhere. He's throwing it or he's getting killed. And, that is a real risk worry I have with taking somebody who's sort of a pure pocket passer.
Do you have Dart as your quarterback 3?
No, Jackson Dart is QB2 for me.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Dart 2, Shedeur 3?
Yes.
Interesting. Good stuff, Pete. Any parting words for our wonderful chat? You guys are great in the chat tonight. Lots of good questions about quarterbacks. Good talk about prospects right before the combine here. We should get a lot of important information out of when Thursday, Pete? Is that stuff they start measuring on Thursday and stuff?
First day of testing and everything is Thursday.
Yeah.
I mean, my big thing is I hope a lot of guys participate. Abdul Carter, I'm not surprised he's not participating. Found out Colston Loveland's not participating because he has shoulder surgery and played through it all year.
Will they still get measured though?
Measured, probably. I would assume they will.
Like Shedeur and Cam will get measured, even though they're not
I
throwing.
would think so. I'm certainly expecting that Shedeur is hiding from that scale unless he's just loaded with water. But I want all the data. I want as much data as I can get. Data is helpful.
For sure.
And in sort of getting a real feel for where this class is going to end up. I would suggest don't overreact to 40 times. 40 times are great. I wish we didn't overreact to 40 times so much because what I would love nothing more. The test which I wish was mandatory will never happen is the 3-cone. I am way more interested in the results of the 3-cone. And the last couple of years, like almost nobody does it, which is really frustrating. But data is good. Data is helpful.
Yep. We'll get a lot of it. Some important stuff like hand size and things like that for quarterbacks and all that stuff. So just keep it locked. We've got boots on the ground there in Indianapolis. 2 of our guys, on the ground, boots on the ground at the combine, reporting back to the OBR daily. and hope to get them on. They'll have video clips they're sending back on the regular, so you can stick to this channel. Make sure you hit subscribe and notifications so you know every time one of those clips goes up. But also hope to have them, one of them, pop through on the show on Thursday night. So appreciate you guys. Oh, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you slowly loving the show. We hope to wear you down in that fashion. Anything else, Pete?
Stay tuned for all the coverage. Fred Greetham, Noah Weiskopf, and Brad Stanbrook are all live and at the event. So they're going to have videos and stuff posted throughout the day from their coverage. Other than that, just stay tuned to the OBR. Lots of content coming as we get through this. And then once this data is finalized, it will allow us to do a whole lot more, I think, firm takes on what we think in terms of the prospects and stuff. I know that's going to be the case for me.
For sure. Absolutely. Much to come as we dial in on a very, very critical offseason for your Cleveland Browns. Keep it locked at the OBR and the OBR streaming network. Thanks for watching The React. Stay tuned for Garage Beers next. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. We are out.